Welcome to the Gen AI podcast, where the future meets fun and tech talk trends. Get ready to dive into the world of artificial intelligence like never before. Your hosts, Dale, Alan, Greg, and Val, are about to take you on a wild ride through the AI universe. So, buckle up, tune in, and let the AI adventure begin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Gen AI podcast. We are on episode 32. Can you believe it? It feels like very few episodes from the point of view that, Greg, can you believe this? We have over 1,000 followers on Spotify alone in our 30-odd episodes.
If you think about it, 1,000 people is a lot of people. Like, if you go and present to a room of people, it's normally like, 30, 50, maybe 100. 1,000 is a big room.
It's massive. And those are only the ones that do follow us. And the majority of you that listen to us don't follow. So we're really, really pleased with that. So thank you so much to everyone, because there's almost 10,000 streams and downloads over only 30 episodes. So everyone knows that you and I are both on sister podcasts elsewhere, and we know how hard it is for people to listen. And on those ones, we do have guests and things like that, and there's other dynamics. But it's just been myself, you, Al's away, sends apologies, and a non-existent Val. But somehow,
I bet people are logging in to see if Val turns up.
The suspense, is that what's drawing them all in?
Every week or every 2 weeks, they're like, has Val turned up?
But no, it's been absolutely awesome. So thank you to everyone that does listen. And if you haven't yet, please do follow us, because the more we get, the more we can make this bigger, better. Keep sending the feedback. We're getting some good feedback as well. So tell us what you want to listen to and what you want to hear from us, because there's plenty. We were talking just offline there, Greg. Well, firstly, welcome back. You haven't been on for a little while. You've had I said on the last episode, you have some big news to share with the world. So do you want to share anything big?
Are you talking about business news, or are you talking about family news?
Family was the most important thing is family, not business.
Yeah. All right. What's the guy from Fast and the Furious called?
I don't know.
Family's everything.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Well, my wife gave birth to our second daughter.
Yay.
2 weeks ago. Yeah.
We need a crowd applause sound effect there. Also,
for my wife, not for me. Like, I've been in 2 childbirths now, and it's one of these things where you're standing there going, all of the effort is being put over there, and I'm sitting here with a cup of coffee, and I'm being supportive and happy, but let's be honest, yeah.
That's awesome. Congrats to both of you and your eldest as well, a family of 4 now. So you're not just developing artificial intelligence, you're developing human intelligence as well, which is awesome.
I try. Developing human intelligence is a lot simpler to start with. The parenting, I'll have to give you a comment on that in a few years.
Yeah, exactly. It's a journey we're on, but no, amazing news there. But it's good to have you back. I know there's plenty been happening. As we're saying there, just chatting offline, there's a lot happening in the market. There's, bounced this off Al previously around, this thought or topic of the potential AI bubble. And the way stock markets may or may not behave, whether that's influenced by government decisions and policies and taxes and all sorts of various things. So how about we start there? Because you're an entrepreneur, you have a business that is in the AI sector. What's your view?
Well, my overall view, my personal view, is that there is incredibly strong evidence for a bubble. Incredibly strong evidence, and not just a single bubble, a number of bubbles. AI, commercial real estate, debt markets, these kinds of things. But also, 15 years from the financial crash, and you normally have a bear market every 10, something like that. I think that COVID and the aftermath of that kind of gave an acceleration to the market. There was 100% a bubble at some point in the future, but it's just a question of timing. But I think the interesting thing for this is actually, for me, is that a lot of the leaders of the main tech companies developing AI, Zuckerberg, Google, OpenAI, etc., they've actually been very transparent about this and said, yeah, there's a rationality in the market. But they've also said, look, this is a race. Whoever gets there first is then a part of the future. And if you don't get there within a certain amount of time, you'll be left behind. And it reminds me a lot of the oil rush in America booms, where you had the massive oil companies were essentially the first companies that got to scale meaningfully. And they've lasted 100 years. And I think, and I'm not saying that AI companies last 100 years, but it's like, it feels that rush. So I think that the business leaders are making some pretty strategic investments where it's burn enormous amounts of cash today, because either it won't matter because you go out of business, or it will matter because you become a monopoly or an oligopoly participant.
What does that mean, I guess, for the individual, the man in the street, so to speak, in the context of this bubble or potential bubble? You know, are we then looking at things like downturns in economy, job losses? Sort of what's the wider impact of this AI bubble?
Well, so I'm not a professional economist. I'm an entrepreneur. But I can tell you what decisions I have made about my own life. I have now divested from all stock markets. I divested the last stock markets yesterday in my personal portfolio. And I'm holding bonds and reserve currencies like Swiss francs, because I'm in Switzerland, so we're holding a lot of Swiss assets. Not because I think that the world's going to end or there'll be, that kind of thing. It's more just I've benefited enormously from the gains that have been made. The long-term correct strategy, by the way, historically has been just leave it and everything will work out in the end. But in this instance, I've said, do you know what? We've made enough gains in the last couple of years. I don't need to be greedy. It could go up. It could go up another 10 years. Cool. Well, then in another 3 or 4, I'll stick it all back in the market. But there's just too many signals for me that the PE ratios are off and the market's overhyped. And I'd rather forego potential gains to avoid significant losses. And then I'd rather have large liquid sums to then buy cheap. I'd rather have that opportunity than opportunity to go up. But that's a personal decision.
Yeah, massive bumper sticker there. This is not financial advice.
Nope.
This is just what
This
Greg is doing.
Literally
with
what
own...
I've done.
It's interesting because I was chatting, and I might have chatted to you about this. I've been chatting to a few people over the past sort of 6-12 months or so with, we speak openly about AI technology on this podcast and others. And, just generally when you're chatting to friends and family, you rarely go around the table with a conversation and not talk about AI. And what the impact might be on the job market. And, no one really knows. It's still unfolding and all of that. And then now you think about investments and money. And if anyone does have a bit of spare money these days, where do you put that money for good investment? Now saying, well, AI is, it's been a hot market, right? But if you're thinking that there's a potential bubble and, there's it's a very saturated place as well.
I think there's my perspective. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. Right now, I think that we're in a very similar situation to the .com bubble.
Yeah.
Not exact, because the AI is producing cash flows and future cash flows, but there is enormous flows of capital investment into the assets of data centers, like trillions of dollars, and that's based off a perception of future demand. So it's like, if you were a business owner and you had to make payroll every month, very rarely would you invest in excess of clear market demand, because you're responsible for running your business and not putting it into the ground. So you would wait until customers are clawing at the door saying we want more and more, and then you would add more capacity to the market. Is that happening here? Open question.
Yeah, and we've spoken previously about the hype, the AI hype, and there's definitely element of hype, but it's not the hype that it's a nothing, if that makes sense. Let me explain that. What I mean by is sometimes people say, "Oh, it's just hype," which means it'll go away.
God, no.
It's not that
This is
type of hype.
This is the internet. Like the .com boom was people going, the internet is the future. Yes, it absolutely turned out to be the future. It's 100% the future. It just wasn't the future for some people.
Yes.
Who invested in some companies. So it definitely was the future for Google and for Amazon and for those. it wasn't the future for Google, whoever raised $1 billion at no revenue, then went bust 6 months later.
MySpace, remember MySpace?
No, MySpace was enormously successful for the guy who founded it. I think that guy's a legend. Yeah.
But I mean, who uses MySpace these days? Is it even a
Oh yeah,
thing anymore?
yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, so it's definitely interesting reading, watching the market, and that does create a bit of anxiety, I think, for people as well. So I think it's something to be acutely aware of in terms of how that impacts everything.
I agree. The one final thing I'd add to that is, I sold yesterday after Nvidia's release, where they were like, we've had the bumper quarter, and then I saw that there was a huge amount of sentiment of, well, there's no bubble.
Yeah.
And that to me was the ultimate red flag. And I was like, no, I'm exiting this party. People are getting silly. Like, people are drinking too much. People are throwing bottles now. I'm out the door and I'm going home before this potentially turns.
Yeah.
My view there is, of course, Nvidia's going to earn the most money. They produce the chips to build the data centers. If you think about it, all of the people, if the fever is processing, that's the fever. So everyone's going, AI is the future, therefore let's build processing. So anything to do with building processing is going to be over the moon right now. It's the chip makers, which is NVIDIA. It's the construction companies. It's the DPRs and the Turners of America, those kinds of ones. It's the power distribution people. That's why Schneider invested in Nodes and Links, by the way. It's because they're capacity constrained for at least 5 years in terms of providing generators for the data centers to actually power themselves. It's the utility providers who are doing all the transmission. It's everyone associated with building a shovel. There's a mining rush. People want shovels. Everyone associated with building shovels is going through the roof right now. And if there's a general sentiment of, that's totally normal, but no one's just looking and going, for example, Palantir's trading at like 150 times revenues. I'm like, this is nuts. This is a personal view. This is crazy land here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, I had the exact same thought, right? In the gold rush, be the one selling the shovels, not chasing the gold, not digging for gold. And I think you put it quite succinctly there in terms of what the equivalent shovel is in this AI race. Yeah. So you've heard it here, folks. Keep a watch out if you do have cash that you're investing. Be interesting to hear your views. If you think different to Greg, of course, let us know. Greg, we've said it before. We share our opinions.
This is an opinion and I'm fine talking about it. I could be entirely wrong, but the key thing here is I am totally fine if I'm wrong, because all I've done is foregone future gains. But if I'm right, I've avoided large losses, and right at this point in my cycle, avoiding losses is more important than achieving gains.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So if we shift gears slightly and move off sort of the market, the AI market view of the world, in terms of tech, nothing has, in my mind, sort of really stood out as a huge leap forward the past sort of couple of months or so. We've seen iterations of Gemini 3 Pro is out now. You've got ChatGPT 5.1. We've previously spoken on previous episodes about, Agent Kit and being able to build your own agent. There's N8N, there's Sim.ai. There's a few of these things out there. But if you play around with them, you still have to understand what it takes to develop an AI agent. You can't just, randomly go in and start building your own AI agents. I think Al said, don't go and build your own AI agent, girlfriend, on the last episode, which is great. But, has anything really stood out for you? I mean, you probably have your finger on the pulse more than me.
The things that have stood out for me are more about the economics of these models than the models themselves.
Okay.
And I can give a view on that in a second. I just wanted to just say on a perspective. It is insane to expect massive developments between podcast episodes. Like, what kind of world are we living in? Like, humanity went thousands of years, and then more recently it was like years before a massive disruption or increase happened. And now we're like, 2 weeks, we're falling behind. Like, it's a nut speed. The thing that I've seen is, which gives me pause for thought, and I don't know what the answer is the commoditization of AI. What I mean by that is that OpenAI, as an example, charges, I don't know, the average user $25, something like that, $50 a month, whatever it is, to use its systems. Meta has essentially released its models for free. I have a suspicion that Google are going a similar way. And essentially, what we're seeing is the large language model or the agentic AI technology model moving from a level 3 to a level 4 development. And I'll need to explain that in a minute. And it's moving there unbelievably quickly, which essentially means that our conversation in 2 years' time is going to either be about the release of vast new capability from model builders, probably not though, and instead it's going to be about the services that these models are an intricate part of. So, from the future, for example, there will be no separation between AWS or Google Cloud or Oracle Cloud and the models, just like there's no separation on AWS with AWS and its server functions. So when you're coding, you can pull AWS functions. They'll just be a component. That's kind of thing. The levels, by the way, I first heard these in a book called The Physics of the Future, which is a fantastic book. And essentially, the author spots a trend, which is 4 phases of technology, which are all associated with cost of access. And it's like level 1 is where the technology is brand new, okay? And only generally governments or modern equivalents of warlords have access to it. It's like one person could get access to it. So think about computing during World War II. Actually, man, it was like, no, this is a secret of the state of the UK. Level 2 is where the cost of access drops to major corporations or minor governments. So here we're talking about, for example, the IBM computer for NASA during the space runs. They bought it, but there are not mum and dad businesses buying those things. It's an enormous expense. Level 3 is where it drops to mass customization. So that's where cars are today for us. It's still a significant purchase. A computer was a significant purchase for NASA. A car is a significant purchase for the average person. So it's like that, but it's available to almost everybody. And then stage 4 is complete commodity. Commodity is where you just meter this stuff and you don't even think about the bills that come in within reason. So water. The most common one is internet usage. So in the 2000s, internet usage was dial up and you'd get like 1 megabyte a month. And when it's used up, your dad would shout at you for using all the internet up. Whereas today, unless you're on a mobile phone contract abroad, you literally don't think about it. It is a pure commodity and you do not care. And if you think about it in that, these agentic AI models, level 1, we would never see because that's behind the scenes. Okay. That'd be in some, American deep site somewhere. Level 2 is where you're looking at major corporations. OpenAI made it level 3 very quickly. Basically, OpenAI emerged and made it level 3. Level 2 was probably the researchers at individual universities building them themselves, etc. Now it still costs people very fast. If people are giving these models away for free, and there's a massive let's say there's an oversupply in processing capacity, it means that minus supply, prices are going to plummet. It's essentially becoming a commodity. What was a pinnacle technology 2-3 years ago is now totally obsolete and free. So it's like, okay, if that, and I know that this, we're talking about Gen AI, and I'm being very specific because you have the technology curve, which plateaus. So you have massive gains early on, and then it starts to plateau as you start to make incremental improvements. But the technology curve is then fast followed by the economics curve. So the economics curve is the opposite. It's incredibly expensive to start with, and then it becomes very inexpensive as you go on. Think televisions today. 40 years ago, televisions were one shit. and 2, massively expensive. And today, TVs are enormous and awesome and basically free in the grand scheme of things. And I'm like, that is probably one of the most interesting developments I'm seeing right now, because it's happening far faster than other technologies have managed to achieve. Other technologies take a decade or so to go down that curve. These, like, AI is taking months.
The interesting differences as you're talking there with the other technologies, or maybe internet's not so different, but TVs, water, electricity, is that it's not necessarily something, a technology you interact with and is listening to you or is getting inputs from you and your life, not watching you, etc. I'm just wondering, are there enough safeguards in place? I mean, we've previously spoken before it was as evolved as it is today, of Skynet and all of these things happening. Is there that risk that we should still be aware of? Are there enough safeguards in place? I'm not saying it's going to go that way, but I want to explore it, because if we're saying it's going to become a commodity, and if I add to the conversation where, although there's not a lot going on, well, there's not massive leaps as we're kind of used to, as you're saying, it's plateauing from a AI perspective. What I've seen a lot on my news feed popping up now is wearables, specifically with smart glasses. And so if this is part of it becoming a commodity, because it's now on your face all the time and on all the time, and it's seeing what you're seeing, and Alexa's listening to what you're listening to what you're saying all the time. And, there's on our phones have been listening to us, for years now, unless we switched it off or just powered it dead. So is there enough in place to safeguard the potential risks? I wonder.
The answer is I don't know.
Yeah, me neither.
What I would say with this is that it's an incredibly difficult balance to make, and I'll explain what I mean by this. I'm talking specifically about politicians here. I don't envy them at all. On the one hand, you're talking fundamentally about regulation here.
Yeah.
On the one hand, we're in a global competition. The UK is in a global market. America is in a global market. China's in a global market. Everyone's in a global competition for producing value. And the way that the world economy works is that countries that produce more value than they consume get rich, and countries that consume more value than they produce are poor. You have your inside economies, which essentially you are creating resources and consuming resources, but it's a factor on that equation. Now, in a global economy, economies of scale, and by economies of scale, you can also have economies of regulation, are a thing. So, for example, China produces 80-90% of the rare earth metals. It's like, okay, cool. America produces 90% of the global technology companies that we adopt. Like, okay, that's a thing. Saudi produces a huge amount of the oil that we consume, like these kinds of things. Long story short, if you have high regulation too early on, just say goodbye to winning that. Because, and I'll talk about it in an entrepreneur's perspective, you haven't found product market fit. You haven't got to mature enterprise. So you don't know what the end result needs to look like. And regulation constrains how fast you can iterate and how attractive it is to iterate in your territory. So you can just forget about it. On the other hand, if you have zero regulation, you're kind of leaving the door open for the economy to be emergent at what it produces. And that could be quite threatening. Now, with a technology like computer chips, this conversation was probably had. It's probably like, well, I'm putting my financial details onto this computer chip and we've connected to the internet. How do I know that these computer chips made in China or Taiwan are not going to... It's been done before, but the problem with that is the people who did that are probably long retired. And the people who are doing this now probably haven't read, like the people who did the regulation around chips and the internet probably haven't written textbooks on how they did the regulation. So there's a complete loss of human learning between these cycles, which is coming to my main point of, I do not envy politicians trying to figure this out. Because on the one hand, you overshoot and kiss goodbye to being in any participant in any way of kind of the global production wave. You'd just be a consumer. And on the other hand, you subject your citizens to random testing of products.
Yeah. It's very fascinating because you talk about governments there, and there's different listeners from all over the world that listen to us. And I'm just trying to look at if we've got any stats here on where people are that listen to us, because I think predominantly our listeners are based in the UK. Here we go. I've got some stats here. Actually, no, I lie. Geographic location, according to Spotify, our main listeners are in India. So 32%. Yeah.
That makes sense to me. The Indians are rapidly emerging as a tech leading nation.
Yeah, it's no secret. Our head of innovation is Indian. He's an amazing guy.
The CEO of Google's Indian. They produce some talent, those guys.
Yeah, exactly. Then it's the US is in second place, and then the UK, and then it falls down from there. Australia, Germany, Canada. But it's interesting because we can read into that a bit. As you know, we're called the Gen AI podcast. We talk, yes, through a project management lens, but we talk generally as well about technology. And those are the countries that are interesting in finding out about what's happening, right? What's happening from dominantly, I guess, a European perspective. Shall I call it that? Because, Al, myself, based in the UK, you based in Switzerland. Let's call it Europe. And we're sort of giving our views from that.
I think we're a production. I don't think I think we're based in the perspective of the West. But
yes,
we're also a product of the West, and this technology has emerged on the mainstream from the West. I think the only kind of multiple perspectives you probably have at the moment is a Chinese podcast and an English spoken podcast is like at the moment. Let's see.
Yeah. Well, you know what? This platform that we use, Riverside, it can translate what we are saying right now into other languages. So, yeah, maybe we'll do a test. Maybe we'll put out episode 32 A and B, and B will be in German or something, or Mandarin, and see what happens. But no, that's quite interesting within itself. And then if you look at the age demographic, Greg, I don't know if we want to read too much into this, but it's actually neck and neck, 28% and 28.6%. So 28.6% is 45 to 59-year-olds, and 28% is 35 to 44-year-olds. So are those decision makers? Are they sort of senior managers listening to us?
I would probably guess that they are. It's your 30s generally where if you're high performing, where you emerge into accountability-based roles.
Yes.
And there's probably a lot of people listening to this who are thinking about what it means for their future career and what it means for the businesses that they own and run.
Yeah. It's very, very interesting reading in terms of the listeners that we get. But yeah, if you're listening to this one, give us direct feedback, because we're just looking at stats and trying to make certain assumptions and draw out certain conclusions. But yeah, it's really, really fascinating. Look, just bringing back the topic I spoke about there in terms of wearables and how that might relate to the construction industry. So we've spoken previously about robotics on site, but do you see a world in where sort of nodes and links could be integrated with some sort of wearable?
Oh, we're doing it right now. Yeah,
okay.
Of course. That's kind of old news at this point. Obviously, I sit at the top of the organization, so I get to see a lot of things. But yeah, what I see now is that let's just
breaking news, folks. Breaking news, product release.
Let's just bucket it into epochs. I don't know how long an epoch is, between 2 and 5 years, something like that. I'd say epoch 1 has already kind of been. Well, we've gone through epoch 1, but the next epoch has already been decided. It's basically integrating AI into the tech that we have. So on-site progress tracking. Like seeing if welds are any good. All of the project controls, project management analysis, the document recognition, the workflow automations, all of this kind of stuff. People starting now, I say this from my personal perspective, people starting now will just inevitably lose, because you had to start 5 years ago to get to the point where you have the capability and capacity to generate it now, and it's going into a economies of scale motion. So, for example, I speak with some businesses who are like, yes, we're building our own large language models in-house. And I'm like, dude, in 12 months, Facebook will give you, or Google will give you the models for free that are infinitely better than what you're building. However, if you're trying to design an architecture for how models will work in your organization, perfect. That's what you should do. So that's Epoch 1. I think Epoch 2 is when we start really getting into the proper robotics flow of construction. By the way, I think we'll have, we've already got generative designs and we've already got generative scheduling and all of this kind of stuff now. It's just about getting it better. So that's all Epoch 1 to me. Epoch 2 is the robotics element. Now, the robotics will start out poo. So you will have auto-driving trucks on site, and you will have tool drone delivery, or something like, I forgot the tool, it's back at the shed, send me a tool, that kind of stuff. Or you'll have bots running around, or you'll have, basic stuff. But again, that'll start rubbish, and then it will start getting really good and really affordable. And I actually think by, Epoch 3 will just be the economics of scale. It'll be the just mass production of the laptop, which is the mass production of the robot. And I actually think by the time that you and I get to, our we will actually have a significant amount of a construction site fully automated. There will be robots walking around doing trade roles and things like that. And you will have full AI orchestration. And we call construction orchestration project management.
Yes, indeed. So if I replay that and if I heard you correctly, it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying for you, we're going to skip straight. We're not going to have wearables. It'll go straight into robotics.
We'll have wearables. We'll have wearables in Epoch 1.
Okay.
Mainly because of the technology of access right now. Well, still, by the way, robotics have wearables. It's called a sensor. It's just integrated. You normally get in trouble with the police if you try to integrate a camera into someone's forehead. So we call it a wearable, but it's just who's holding the sensor. Is it a human holding the sensor? Therefore, it's called a wearable. Is it a piece of technology holding the sensor? Therefore, it's called an integrated piece of tech.
And this then is going to bring in a whole load of sort of new regulations, and you have to rewrite the rule book because it goes to the whole, if L was on you, the accountability of the decision making.
Yeah, well, actually, again, coming to the full cycle, think about this. Construction massively drives GDP. We're talking macroscopic stuff here, okay? The country that heavily regulates sensors and robots will become the consumer of sensors and robots as opposed to the producer. So let's just eliminate all of those countries for now and focus on the countries that will allow it. America will allow it and China will allow it. Full on. China already is, and China's already very far ahead, very far, developed. Then what's going to happen is that they're going to have an enormous decrease in the marginal cost of production. So, for example, the cost of getting a trade on site is going to go from 10 to 1. They're then going to be able to build much faster, much bigger, or at much less cost, or all three. Therefore, GDP will explode. Therefore, the countries that heavily regulated at the start will have a panic and then eventually figure out their regulation to allow it to happen. It's as simple as that. Where will this cycle in my head, what makes most sense for this cycle to play out, is the countries that have significant construction unionization will probably be the slow countries. And the countries that are onto the path of explosive productivity and growth will probably be the front countries. And the reason I say that is these robotics will directly go against people's jobs. It's exactly what we're seeing in the US with Waymo and like Uber and all of this and taxi drivers, etc. It's just that the US is much more open to, well, get better or get cheaper, that kind of thing. But for example, France, no, that was heavily regulated. Okay, simple. France is just not at the forefront of tech companies in transportation, full stop. It's just that simple.
Yeah, and you know what, as you're talking there, if you remove the whole point of robotics, right, you, even today with people involved, we know the UK is incredibly slow when it comes to construction projects. So
because
exactly. So regardless of robotics, right? It's the whole regulation argument stands now. It doesn't have to wait for robotics.
This is the macro argument, and I know we're going a bit off Gen AI, but this is the macro argument why the UK is declining in its comparable wealth to other countries, is because the countries generally develop a large amount of wealth when they have little regulation, and then countries exploit that wealth, which, by the way, can be a very good thing. For example, everyone getting NHS access or whatever. It can be a social good, but the creators get killed off, and then it's just the administrators. And then the thing with administration is it never reverses. It's the same as wages. You can never go to someone and go, "Do you know how you got a pay increase last year? Oh, I'm going to get a pay decrease this year." No, everyone expects a pay increase every year. Regulation only goes up, and then it's just a generational cycle where the country will have a crisis. UK, Germany, France, they're all going through it now. Why? Because they were the powerhouses of the 70s and 80s. And they were the powerhouses after World War II. So it's like, okay, then you're going to have 10 to 20 years of real pain. You're probably going to vote in some non-great people. But what you're going to essentially do is deregulate massively and then reset.
It's a fascinating time we live in. It's the most exciting time. Well, I guess every generation is going to say that, right? But I mean, it's a great time to be like, there's so much opportunity, especially when there is this VUCA world that we live in, volatility breeds opportunity for a lot of people.
Well, I'd say, 100% I agree. Volatility breeds opportunity. But what I'd say as well is it's not unpredictable volatility. Like, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And I actually think we have too few people reading philosophy and history at school and throughout than we actually need. And you can always find a relatable example of something in any kind of technology or any kind of country or economic movement. There isn't a perfect replication, but there's a relatable replication. And none of it is new.
Mm.
And by the way, this whole is like, okay, so what happens when a country moves from innovation and production, which is where the production per person is increasing, to stagnation? Well, what happens is people don't adjust their expectations of consumption. So it's like, well, we had all of these services. I demand all of these services, but production isn't increasing at the same rate. So generally what happens in there is politicians go into a zero-sum mindset, which is if you have something, you probably stole it, which creates quite a combative atmosphere, which basically chases away all the people who are the creators. And where do they go? They go to the countries who accept them for who they are, which is creating. Where are the countries currently that accept creators for who they are? It's America, and actually Israel, and Dubai, and to an extent, Switzerland.
India.
And I'm not talking about myself. Yeah, India, or massively India. Massively India. So it's like, okay, if you're in not a repressive, but, a constraining environment, and you've got ambitions on a global scale, see you later, man.
Yeah. And on that note, folks, another episode has gone by, but hopefully we've given you plenty to think about there. Greg, it's been amazing to catch up with you again. Hopefully we catch each other face to face soon. But yeah, shout out to our top 3 countries, India, the US, and the UK. Let's see maybe on the next episode if anyone surpasses India, because it is quite close.
I bet there's going to be so many Indian billionaires in the next 10 to 20 years. And all I'd say to the people listening to this is, look at the businesses that have worked in the West and just replicate it in an Indian context.
Yeah, it's huge. But thank you guys for listening. It's awesome, Hopefully what we're sharing is of value. If it's not, as always, let us know. We're happy to be told otherwise and be critiqued. That's why we put ourselves out there. But Greg, like I say, it's been great to see you again. And folks, till next time, we say goodbye. And thank you for joining us. Bye for now.